Hi, I'm Angela Wolf. I'm a fashion designer and online instructor. And today I'm going to give you some really fun tips for making a t-shirt really fun. Look at this. This is a panel that I've added to the bottom of the t-shirts, and these are all pleats. And then I sewed them on, and then I just twisted them different ways. On the neckline here, those are all darts sewn different ways. So to make that even more fun, I'm going to show you how to do this on a cover stitch machine. So here I have some samples of what I'm talking about. The cover stitch machine, in case you're not familiar with it, it has a stitch, just like this, where the top side has 2 rows, and the back side looks like this. You might be familiar with this stitch because it's usually on a hem of a shirt, it's on the hem of t-shirts. It stretches a little bit because on the back side, when you stretch it, it doesn't break. So here I have rows and rows and rows of cover stitch on here. And this, I've done the same technique as I did on that shirt. I use different color threads here so you can see what's going on. But I stitched them all just like this, and then I stitched a row holding the pleat down here, and then going this way. So that looks really good. Now you really couldn't do this with a serger because a serger cuts the fabric at the same time. So the cover stitch actually just does a stitch, and I could do a stitch however wide we want. So let's get started. Let me show you how to do this and how the machine works. So I have a piece of fabric, and this is how you start. If you're going to add this to the bottom of a t-shirt or a bottom of a top, just grab a long piece of fabric because by the time you scrunch this up, it's going to be a lot longer than your shirt. So sometimes I'll measure around the shirt and just multiply it times 4. That's just easy, and it leaves you a lot of extra. So here's just a little swatch. And to get started, now this would be the same if you did this with a sewing machine or a cover stitch. Now remember, a cover stitch is a specific stitch. They have separate cover stitch machines, or sometimes the cover stitch is included in your serger. It's a specific stitch. If you don't have a cover stitch, you can do this with a sewing machine too, and just do a regular stitch. So there you go. I'm marking a line. And then, like on this other sample, I think every 2 inches. This is a quilter's ruler, which is great because you can kind of see through it, and I'm lining up my chalk mark. Try to make this one a little darker for you. Here we go. This is just clay chalk. So I'm just going to make a marking. It's so easy to follow when you're pressing, when you have a marking. You could use pens too. They have, I think the blue pen is water erasable. You've probably seen that at some of your stores. I'll make this one a little darker here. The blue one, you put water on it and disappears. The purple one will disappear in 24 hours. So if you're not going to get to your project in 24 hours, don't use that one. I did that once for alterations on a person's dress. And do you know, 24 hours passed and she had to come back because all of the markings disappeared. Okay, here we go. These are going to be my lines. And now I'm going to go press these because it makes it so much easier to go through the machine. So I'm going to fold this on my white chalk mark. Press, using a lot of steam. Use a clapper because this combines with the steam and makes a nice crisp crease. Look at that. Perfect. So just go through your lines. If you're adding this to a shirt, you're going to have a lot of these, so just take your time. But it's really important to press every single chalk mark before it goes through the machine because it just helps. Number 1, it helps to feed through the machine, and number 2, it helps so you don't have a wavy seam. Okay, so here we have all of our creases. So let's go to the cover stitch machine. Again, if you don't have a cover stitch machine and you want to do this with a sewing machine, just do the same thing I'm doing, but just pick a straight stitch on your sewing machine. So on the cover stitch, I have this set to a wide stitch, meaning the needles are wide apart. And there's a few other settings. I'm using the standard setting on this machine, but you have a differential feed and a stitch length. I usually choose the longest stitch length that I can. It just looks a little bit nicer, and this is for decoration. So you can sew this as wide as you want. I usually just line it up with the side of the presser foot. It's just easy for me to follow. And just stitch. Start at one end. Always leave a little excess because each end doesn't always look so great. And I'm just going to stitch all the way to the end. and pull it out. Let's see what we have here. That looks great. See how I said each end is a little messy? Now, if you have any missed stitches here, start over. Because if you have missed stitches, all you need is one little stitch to be out and the whole thing will come unraveled, and you don't want that. If you're having a problem with skip stitches with your cover stitch machine and you're using a stretch fabric, you might want to consider using a stretch needle, like a stretch number 12. I know it says don't do that, but I've had to do that and it works really well. Okay, do a couple more rows here. So you can kind of see what's happening here. Cut all my extra threads off. So the back side looks like this, and the front side is looking like this. Very similar to what we had over there. Do one more here. Now, one more thing, by the way. If you're going to use this for a collar, you would take your collar and start at the center back, and one way do all of your stitches going this way, and the other way have them go this way. So then when you wrapped it around your neck, they both would look even. Okay, so one more time here. I'm taking my, right where my white is, flipping it over, and I'm going to stitch right here, making sure that none of the extra fabric is getting in the way. All the way to the end. Okay. And again, it looks great, minus all the extra threads at the back. So let's take one more look here. See how nice these are looking? So here's your options. You can take this to the sewing machine, similar to this one. Now I ran this through the cover stitch, and this one I ran through the sewing machine. So you can take this to the sewing machine and run a stitch this way, and this way, and this way, as many as you want. So the idea is to have one this way and then to push all of yours back to the other. Similar to the top that I had, which I did that with beads, hand beads, but it's easy to do with the sewing machine. So let me run this through the cover stitch. I'm just going to trim off this end here because I'm just showing you a quick small sample. But I want to show you what I did to make it look like this. This one, I ran through the cover stitch and I left all this free. So if this was hemmed, this would be a great bottom on a skirt. Just kind of a fun thing. So going back to the cover stitch, trim some of this off here. I'm going to run this through just to show you how this will look. Just like that. Now remember, every cover stitch is different, so you might not, your machine might, when you pull the fabric out, might be a little bit different than what I'm doing. See how easy that is? Okay, now I'm going to do one more, going this way. You just kind of have to feed your fabric through because there's not a lot of room right there. There we go. I'm making a mess with the threads, but you're getting the idea. See how fun that is? Now this way I could either add beads or stitch it with the cover stitch or with machine. Isn't that a fun, different design? I can think of so many areas to use this. On a pillow, I mean, this would work anywhere. This would look really good with cotton as well. Spray it with bleach if you want this way, and then turn it over. All these ideas, that's how easy it is to put pleats in with a cover stitch machine. One of the easiest way to alter a garment is to take off the old buttons and add some new fresh ones for a good look. Hi, I'm Angela Wolf. I'm a fashion designer and online instructor. And as we're sewing along our jacket, we're at the point where we have to put in buttonholes. And I don't know if you remember in the old days, our buttonholes never came out right. But the machines are so much better now, so I'm going to show you some easy ways to do this. So first of all, you're going to need to mark where your buttons go. And there's these cool little contraptions that just kind of spread out that you can mark evenly where your buttons are going to go. So usually, like if you're going to use big buttons like this, just space it however you want to. Even if the jacket pattern tells you exactly where to put them, you can change it for your own design. So I'm pretending that this is the front of a jacket. I'm just going to mark where these buttons are going to go. There, that looks nice. Another thing to keep in mind is that you do not want the buttonhole to go right to the edge of your jacket. You want to step back. I usually, depending on how big the button is, just picture that once the button is on, it's going to slide over to the edge of your buttonhole. So if your buttonhole ended right here, my button would actually be hanging off the jacket. That's not really what you want to do. So I would want my jacket to stop about right there. So here we go. That's about a 1/2 inch. So what I would do is mark 1/2 inch either with chalk, or you can use a hand-based a stitch through there, just to know that's where you want your buttons. Okay, then you have a buttonhole foot. Now this buttonhole foot, they're all pretty similar now, and it kind of looks a little funny. This slides back and forth, and then you have this thing in the back. This opens up, and the point of this is to put your button in and put it upside down. No matter what size button you have, it'll fit in there. Just kind of slides in there. But here's a little tip. If it's right like this, perfect to your button, it's going to stitch a buttonhole right to that perfect size. Now on a jacket, sometimes it looks a little bit nicer if you add just a little bit, maybe 1/8, 2/8 of an inch, because then you have a little extra room that you don't have to cut off, and it just stabilizes your button a little bit. So I've left a little extra room, so I'm going to take my button out of there because it might fall off. Let's go to the machine. And if your buttonhole foot has a letter on it, it should be facing you. Then you know you put it on right. So basically, the button should be back here, this extra section. And then a lot of the machines have something that just pulls down like this, and you just slide it right between the silver and the plastic, because that's how your machine knows where to stop and go. Then go to your screen, and depending on how many buttonholes you have to choose from, I like the ones with the circle in them for pants, and a lot of jackets too. And then there's some, it gives you just the angles. But I'm gonna choose this one here with a circle and a little end tip, because it's just kind of decorative. And I line up my foot with my chalk marks. Make sure that your fabric is even. If you're like this, your buttonhole's gonna go that way. Press your foot down, make sure everything's even, and stitch. Sewing machines have come so far on these buttonholes. I remember I would do anything not to put a buttonhole in a jacket. And it basically just stitches. I'm gonna go a little faster here. And the machine's basically doing itself. I'm just making sure that the fabric doesn't move around. Can you believe this? Sometimes I'll put buttonholes in and I won't even cut them open. They're just for decoration. So I'm using yellow thread so you can see this. So you'd pick up a thread that matches your machine, but let's see what we have here. That looks really good. It has the circle, the little end tack. Perfect. My button would fit in there just perfectly, and I'd even have a little extra. So here's another thing. This is fray check, and what I usually do before I cut these open is, I'm not gonna do it right now because it takes a few minutes to dry, but you just dab it into this edge. Let it dry. Test it on a piece of fabric first to make sure you don't end up with a stain, but that helps your fabric not to fray after you cut it. And then there's all kinds of little button kits. It's called button cutter kits. It's just a little piece of wood, and this just is a little flat like this. And press. This is how you cut your buttonhole. This is way better than a seam ripper because trust me, the first time you run a seam ripper through and you forget you're supposed to stop, or you slip and you ruin your whole front of your jacket, that'll only happen once, trust me. I've done it. One more. Again, I'm leaving a little bit uncut here just to salvage that area. And then here's one that has a circle in it. And that's gonna go right down here where the circle is. This is a great one for jeans as well. There we go. So my button would just fit right in there, and that's how easy it is to make your own buttonholes. So in the next lesson, I'm going to show you how to actually put buttons on with a sewing machine.